Hello, Troy Love.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing great.
You're,
Um,
you've got the Hawaiian pineapple theme,
yes, I couldn't
and
wear a sweater. It's too freaking hot.
it's too hot and humid here in Arizona. It's like ridiculous dew points. Yeah.
You have a lot of rain up there right now. Oh,
We like it skirts us always. We have things, the
hmm.
systems kind of bump into each other and then we don't get anything. But the dew point has been in the upper 60s, which is very unpleasant. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But
especially when
anyway,
it's 115.
yeah, there's that. So. So, Troy, the first question is how can we heal from the fear of abandonment? I love that question because it talks about the fear, you know, which is so true. I mean, there's the feeling of it and then there's the fear of it. So, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm not seeing that. Did you put that?
Look, put an answer. If you,
Oh, answer.
yeah, if you look at the answer, that's my workaround for,
Oh, perfect. Okay.
yeah.
Um, okay. So there's a couple of ways to work with that. Um, First is as an adult, when we're children and these wounds happen, we really are powerless to do anything about it. I can't do anything. Like if my dad or my mom walked out of my life or something happened as a child, I really don't have any ability to do anything about that. And even as an adult, if somebody chooses to walk out of my life, I can't make them stay, right? I can't do anything to make them stay. But what I do have the ability to do as an adult is be able to tell a different story about why they're leaving, why they've abandoned me. Um, and even with the fear of abandonment, like there's a story that's being told underneath that, and often we tie that to those core beliefs. The three genres: I am not enough, there's something wrong with me, I'm flawed, I'm defective, or I really can't depend on anybody to actually be there for me. I'm going to be alone in the world, there's no one going to be there for me, or there's nothing I can do. And all three of those core beliefs are not true. They're not 100% true. Like, number one, the person is not abandoning you because there's something wrong with you. The person is making choices for themselves. They may be judging you, they may be having some things that they're going through, and so they're making a decision to walk out, but that really isn't about you. And so if I can understand this isn't about me, this is about them, that's part of it. Even if that person is leaving, are there other people that I can reach out to? Are there other people that do stick around? And is it true that there's nothing I can do? Well, there's a lot of things I can do. What kind of self-care things can I do? How can I work through that? So those are things you can do if you actually are abandoned. The fear of being abandoned is really driven by those shadows of shame that are telling you that the worst things are going to happen if you're abandoned. They're going to leave you. Your spouse is going to leave you if you don't shape up. You're going to lose your job. They're these worst case scenarios that actually make me end up behaving exactly the way that I don't want to behave. And so part of that is confronting the fear. What is the worst case scenario? And sometimes I'll even have a client like write it out, make it the worst story, like the city blew up and there's fire everywhere. Like, make it as awful as you possibly can. And then you could even read it out loud to somebody, and then you can say, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 100, what's the likelihood that that is going to happen? And chances are pretty slim, but that's okay. So that's the second step. And then the third step is, okay, so let's say it did happen. Then what would you do? And I want you to write out how you're going to handle that. And I want you to be as specific as possible. So we do that. And then I'm like, great. So in the unlikely event that that happens, you now have a plan. So let's not worry about that anymore. You have a backup plan. You know how you're going to handle that. what can we focus on today that's actually going to be helpful?
I love all that, and I there's so many components of it. And I actually use that if the absolute worst thing happens, yes, the odds are probably slim that my catastrophizing would really happen. But if I have a plan, then they're and I don't have to be alone. My plan can include reaching out to other people. But I love that you talked about writing it out. Because journaling is so effective at getting things out. Like taking it out of our heads and putting it on paper, and then verbalizing it to someone else. They may go, that would be a fantastic novel, fiction novel, like you might find your writing skills, with all of that. But the reality is, you probably, those things, won't happen. But again, like you said, if they do, now you go, oh, I have a plan, or even if pieces of it happen. So, the thing blows up, but it doesn't start on fire, but you still have the plan for the bigger with the
Yeah.
bigger issues. Yeah, but and fear, I have on my computer. Fear is false evidence appears real, and as long as anytime I'm going like, oh, I'm fearful, I have to look at what is real, and there are threads of real in lots of things, but the whole catastrophizing, probably not the real. So. Okay, so now you should be able to go to the open and see them.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. So Troy, thank you for the work you do. I agree. I am frequent participant in Friday's Shame Resiliency webinar. My question is, I have struggled with having self-worth. I have always had to earn it through work, relationships, and accomplishments. How can I change this? I'm an addict with almost 5 years of sobriety, but recovery has been a struggle. And like, it's interesting. I've always had to earn it. And I was like, I bet you always felt like that. But yeah, anyway, so thoughts?
Well, first, thank you. I see your name, and I wish that you would believe me when I tell you that you're enough and that you matter and you made an impact in my life. So that's uh, at the same time, you said it beautifully. You've always felt like you had to earn it through work, relationships, and accomplishments. It's that way for, I think, a lot of people, but specifically, particularly for men. The culture around masculinity is, how do I prove to you that I'm enough? So, I have to be the best on the sports team. I have to be the strongest. I have to to be the best, and that's how I'm gonna earn your praise. That's how I'm gonna earn your recognition. And then if you grew up in a home where that was how it worked, you had to do things in order to get the recognition and praise from your parents all the time. It wasn't unconditionally given. Then that also becomes the pattern that then we chase for the rest of our life. So first, the very fact that you're putting this out means that you recognize that that is something that's not working for you. And so that's the first. So the second is being able to identify those shadows of shame, and I know you're familiar with them. How are those shadows of shame showing up and hijacking your worth? So you are trying to find a job and you didn't get that particular job, and you need it because you just lost your last job and you're not sure how you're going to provide for your family. Well, what shadows show up? The judge, particularly, like you're not hireable. There's something wrong with you. You don't know how to interview right. Your impotent one says that you're never gonna be able to support your family. They show up because they're trying to protect you from being hurt, right? And so it's in those moments where, number one, you recognize the shadows are out. You call them out. Hey, I see you. I can see what you're doing. The truth is what? And the truth is, I do have skills. Even if you can't fully believe that you are enough, you could identify, but I know how to do this or I know how to do that. And as you work on that, eventually you come to a place of self-acceptance, but it's a practice. Self-compassion is a practice. And we live in a world full of shame all day long, every day, on the media, on the news, on the commercials, everywhere is a comparison thing. And so part of this is the continual practice of reminding myself I'm enough. And you are, Mike, you are. And I love you, brother.
And I agree. It is not gender specific though. Trust me. So I was getting out of my car last Thursday on my way to my 12-step meeting. And as I'm getting out of the car, I don't even remember what all was going on, but I'm like, oh, you're such an idiot. I mean, like I literally said that out loud to myself. And then I went, no, you're not, like, so yeah, this constantly, having to evaluate, that's a false narrative. Those are, that's, and then, you know what, I went into the 12-step meeting, and when I was sharing, I owned that. I owned that I shared that, and that was not accurate, and that's how I combat that stuff, is to own that I said it and own that it's not true, but it does take work, but, and I'm going to challenge you on I always had to earn it. That's the narrative we told ourselves, yes, I always had to achieve, like if I didn't get the right grades, whatever it is, and so, but that's, I learned a long time ago that I'm a human being, not a human doing. And that's like, I have to pay attention to being, not just, I'm checking off enough boxes, for my worth. I'm not just the sum of my check boxes. So I'm glad you're here. Troy Love does a great in-person retreat on finding peace. Like that might be a good next step for you. Just saying. So,
thank you.
Okay. Addict here, 4+ years past discovery, around 4 months into serious recovery. I'm working on recognizing my needs, but really struggling. I believe I have wounds around neglect. What are some tangible steps I can take to start getting in touch with my needs and learning how to meet them?
All right. Well, here you go. These are the 8 core needs that I came up with. So oftentimes when we're dealing with a wound of neglect, what we need is attention and we need presence. So I need to know that someone's going to be there and that they're paying attention to me. So when your neglect wound is being hit, that's probably what's happening. And a lot of people, a lot of kids learn how to act out in order to get somebody to pay attention to them because they're feeling neglected, and the ways that they've tried to do it didn't work very well. And then the parents get super annoyed because, they're climbing up the walls and they're jumping around and stuff, but they're doing it because they need your attention. I was talking to a friend of mine who had a 3-year-old daughter, and then they just had a new baby. And their 3-year-old daughter was like acting out, poking the baby. She was not happy that she had a little brother. And they're like, what do we do? Do we take her to therapy? And I'm like, no. What you do is you spend 20 minutes of individual time with her every day. You do, and then your wife does. And tell me in a week how that worked. And he's like, oh my gosh, she is so much better. And I'm like, yeah, because she's feeling neglected. And so she's trying to tell you that she's feeling neglected. So so that's it. You need someone to pay attention to you. So what are some tangible steps that you can do that? Well, who in your life can you have pay attention to you? Do you have a partner? Do you have friends? Do you have a coworker? It's okay to say, hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time? I want to share something with you, and I want to interact with you. Also, can you give attention to yourself? How often do we not do that? We don't believe we're worthy of it. Nobody got time for that. Like, so can you actually pay attention to yourself? Can you spend a few minutes tapping into what you're feeling? Can you validate your own fears and emotions and be there for yourself? That can go a long way in helping you as you're working through the pain that you live in as you have a neglect wound being hit.
I love this. I actually did a screenshot because I was like, this is so helpful. So, yes. And I love that you were talking about, how do we get our needs met And I was like, it's one thing when it's a 3-year-old. It's a whole different thing when it's a 43-year-old. Having the
Right.
me, which is unfortunately what addiction is. So, and I'm glad. I'm sorry that it's taken 4 years. I'm glad you're leaning into recovery now. If you haven't already done so, the Sex Addiction 101 online work group starts July 6th. Solid foundational things. We can't address all of these other things until and unless we have a solid foundation of recovery, or a solid foundation for sobriety. Recovery takes a longer period of time. So on our Seeking Integrity website, you'll see the work group tab. Separately, Troy does the attachment wound work group, which is deeper work. So all of those are, psychoeducation. Many therapists suggest that their clients participate in those. We've got a betrayed partner group starting again July 21st. They're just helpful support. They're not enough, but they sure do, make an impact. So consider all of those as well. Oh, here's a good one. Why? They're all good questions. Why does the voices say bad things and not supporting things? And where do those voices come from? I want to know that answer too. So.
It's interesting. I just did an interview with a guy who has he's a marriage and family therapist, but he's kind of transitioning his practice into more of a um, spiritual modality. And
Okay.
he believes, I was talking to him about the shadows of shame, and he believes that there's like a sense of evil connected to them. Whether that's true or not true is up to everybody's opinion, but I call them the shadows of shame because they don't say nice things to you. They're not nice. They are shameful statements. So they're never going to say anything nice. So they come from a place of trying to protect you from being hurt. It's just that they are lousy. They're really lousy at their job. They've been around for years. They're like the person in the workplace who's been working for 40 years, and they just have a really negative attitude, and they're just waiting out for retirement, except for these shadows of shame don't retire. So that's the challenge. They're there because they're trying to protect you. Why don't they say supporting things? Well, because they're the shadows of shame. But there are other sources to get supporting comments and places. There's a part inside of you that is full of light and love and compassion and joy, and that part doesn't usually have a voice. Right, it's not a strong voice because the shadows of shame have like shut it up so many times, wrapped it in duct tape. So once I can get the shadows of shame to step away for a moment and I can tune into that light, I can hear it, and it's beautiful. If you have a higher power, like a belief in God or a higher power, you can absolutely get supporting affirmations from your higher power. If you have a belief in that kind of source of energy, there's an activity that I often have people do where on one page they write down a letter from the shadows of shame, and it's in second person, and it's really usually not nice. And then on the second page they write a letter from that source of love and truth, and then they look at the two and they can see the energy that they both carry. That came from them, like they wrote it. So you're able to tap into that. But oftentimes they get so shut out, and we've been so hurt that we just fall into the trap of believing I'm not worthy of hearing the words that God has to say to me. I'm not worthy of feeling love. There's something wrong with me. And so that's the work we do about that. But in the end, the shadows of shame are never going to say nice things, and we just have to recognize they're not doing that to hurt me, but I don't have to listen to them.
We need more voices from Sunlight for Self.
Yes.
Okay. The next question, Troy, is hi, after all the talk regarding should I stay or should I go, I've decided I need to go. Oh, always a hard choice. We have separated for a few months after a relapse, one of many. However, we are still just separated with no plan of sobriety or recovery. My husband has shown me over and over again he is incapable of recovery. I'm not sure what is holding me back. Might be fear and shame. We have 3 young kids and no money. How do I get out of this stuckness? That's a very, thank you for being here and sharing that. And it's a very stuck place to feel.
Mhm. Oh, we do have a drop-in group, and maybe you can say more about that for people who have decided to move on. Um, and I think we maybe have a couple of those. So
Yeah, we have a moving on alone for betrayed partners. We have a moving on alone for addicts, and they're different. And the moving on alone is I've been left, I have left, or I'm thinking of leaving. So it isn't like, it isn't just one type, but the Thursday afternoon is for betrayed partners. The Friday morning is for the guys.
So you identified that the thing that's holding you back is probably fear, and if I were a betting man, I would say it is fear. So like we talked about earlier, okay, worst case scenario, like if you left and you took your young 3 kids and you're gonna have to go get a job and you're gonna be a single mom, I'm assuming, or a single parent anyway. You're gonna be like worst case scenario, what like write it out. How bad is it gonna be? And then if it got that bad, what would your plan be? How would you manage that? Who would you reach out to for support? Uh, um, those kind of things. So it's not, it's you, it's not just you, and that's probably why you're having the hard time. If you didn't have 3 young kids, you probably would have been out of there already. But because you have 3 young kids and you understand like they have a dad and how is this going to impact them, like I get through your compassion and your worry that you don't want to cause them further harm. And so it would be helpful to maybe have some support, some mentors. Um, Not necessarily, I mean, I hope you have family and friends that you can reach out to, but people that are a little bit more objective, who aren't just going to either tell you what you want to hear or are going to tell you what an a-hole he is. Like that's not particularly helpful. But to have some people who can actually have some objective support and maybe have gone through it and what they've had. So going to the support group might be a place for you. If you're able to have a therapist who can maybe hold some space for you while you're walking through this, that would also be helpful. But it is fear, and it's a justifiable fear. And so part of that is facing it and figuring out how much longer do I want to live like this before I decide to make a change.
And I'm putting, because I thought, well, I'm saying this about the drop-in groups, but the drop-in groups are in a similar place from where you found the webinar, but the drop-in groups are different. So somebody earlier mentioned Troy does, for betrayed partners on alternating Thursdays, and then every Friday morning he does a group for the guys. So there's lots of resources. And it's not just the moving on alone that could be helpful for supporting you, but any of them, those just have a specific focus where, where they, they aren't trying to repair the relationship. You have 3 children, finding a way to co-parent regardless of what he's doing or not doing, it is a lot. I love what, Troy was talking about is, laying it all out, journaling, talking to people. I often recommend, I don't know, what state you're in, and it really varies state to state, but seeking legal, counsel. What will it look like? What is child support? All of those things, it helps take away the unknowns. And so just getting input, whether you do or don't, it's just knowledge, and having that information can be helpful. And one thing, and this was a big thing for me, is in a previous marriage, I had to decide, is what I'm modeling for my child, what I would want for her. And that was a factor for my consideration. It was just me. Take what you need and leave the rest. But I had to think about, is staying in this relationship better, or not? And I made sure, obviously, since I said it was a previous relationship, what I chose. But and that's me, but I think all of those things are, food for thought. And I also think that being in the in between, like, it's not like you have to, if it's a good decision today, it'll be a good decision, tomorrow, etc. But at some point, my experiences, I have found, when when partners in particular, make the decision, like their head will say one thing and their heart says another. And when those two things align, that's when they're comfortable with whatever choice that they've made. I'm sorry for you. I'm the sorriest for him because he has an opportunity, and he can lose all of you because he's hanging on to shreds of whatever in addiction. And problematic. I hate it, but that's addiction is unfortunately not everybody chooses recovery. So, but you're not alone, and I'm glad you're here. Okay, once you have acceptance that the addict just wants to have easier, not into doing the deep work of recovery, but half-ass attempts to, so to speak, what's the best energy efficient way to live with such a person? That's a great question too. Oh, the energy efficient way. I love that.
I do. I love that too. It's going to, there's a couple of things. Number one, you have to give up the expectation that the other person's going to change. You just have to give it up. And if you're willing, if you are able to give it up, and then they continue to half-ass it, your words, then it's just like, it's almost like an apathy feeling. Like you just don't, I'm not telling you to not let it bother you. You get to a point where it just doesn't bother you. It's like, if you're just gonna half-ass it, then that's gonna suck for you. But I'm gonna continue moving on with me, and I'm gonna continue doing my recovery, and I'm gonna continue doing the things that bring me joy, and I'm gonna continue to do that. And if he can't catch on that it's still not working, I'm assuming he, but then eventually you're just going to say, well, I'm ready to move on. Okay, so have a nice life. So the energy is to take to stop giving the energy to the other person and take it back, and just say, I'm going to use this energy for me. And if you're going to not do any, well, that's going to be crap for you. And I'm going to work on me. Easier said than done, but the first part of that is giving up the expectation that that person's going to change. The person's going to do the deep work of recovery. You just give up the expectation, maybe not the hope, but the expectation. You just give it up and say, well, yeah, I guess you're not going to do that, but I am.
Yeah, I'm putting the Empowered Women's Retreat, again, assuming genders here, sorry. And if that's not true, I'm sorry. But this is the stuff that we work on in the Empowered Women's Retreat. It's an in-person retreat. We don't talk about him. We're talking about, empowering you, healing you. And it's the grief and anger work. It's, and it's healthy boundaries, internal boundaries and external boundaries. But yeah, what Troy was talking about is, when in a relationship gets to a place of kind of indifference, when he's talking about the apathy, you do you, I'm going to take care of me, I'm going to do the joy for me regardless of what you do, and you can stay together. I mean, it can be the roommate thing where we just we live under the same roof and do whatever, but you've reduced your expectations that this person is actually going to show up for you or for the relationship, but you are committed to taking care of you. It will shift for you. It's a process, and it's not, and there's grief, so, please don't discount the grief work, and, that he isn't willing to show up for you or the relationship, that he isn't willing to do the work, that he isn't the spouse that you had hoped for or planned for. All of that is real. And so processing through that, working through that, is healing. And I promise you, you can find joy, and serenity regardless of what the addict's doing or not doing. Okay, Troy, I'm the betrayed partner and have a disorganized attachment style. My partner left me and blamed me for both the relationship and the addiction, which I heavily internalized. What are a few steps I can take to start building a secure attachment style?
Beautiful question. So, number one, I would probably, first of all, I hope you have a therapist that you can work through some of this with. That would be helpful. So depending on what books you read, some people don't think you can change your attachment style. I am still undecided about that. But what you can do is, so he's blamed you for some stuff. So let's write down a list of all the things that he's blamed you for, and it be as many as you want. And then you read it and then say, am I going to take responsibility for that? Am I going to take responsibility for that? Am I going to take responsibility for that? And just figure out how many of the things, let's say you had 20 things on the list that he blames you for, and then you did that and you came up with, well, I found I take responsibility for 2 of those things. Okay, so the other 18 that you have been taking responsibility for, can you not take responsibility for those anymore? It's kind of what we were just saying with the last person. Like, can you give that back to your partner and say that that's all his stuff, he's going to have to work out. I can own that I did this and I can own that I did that, but I'm not going to own everything. The other part is, what's the story that you end up believing about yourself because he left you and he blamed you? He's blaming you for his addiction, which is unfortunate because it's definitely not your fault. And he's blaming you for the relationship, which is also not your fault. Like, it takes 2 people to make a relationship work. So, but what do you believe about yourself because he was an addict, or is an addict? What does that say about you? And if you sit with it for a minute, it literally doesn't say anything about you, but your words, I internalize that. I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. I'm not even worthy enough to have a secure attachment style, which is a story. It's a story. So part of that is challenging that. Part of what makes a secure attachment style and a secure attachment style is I can trust that you are going to show up, that you're going to be a person of integrity, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. You're going to hold space for me when I'm upset, and you're not going to freak out. And I'm going to do the same for you. That's what a secure attachment style looks like. So part of that is working on how can you do that for other people, and then how do you find someone who can do that? Because there are some people who can do that.
So Troy, you're talking about attachment styles, like you're talking about in this partnered relationship, which is now an ex relationship. It was an unsecure relationship, but I'm wondering how many people who have, kind of a disorganized attachment style, or some of the other ones, the unsecure, like, is that prevalent in all of their relationships? Or if there is somebody who is like, a trustworthy person, that they show up more as a secure attachment in those relationships.
So there is I think you can even Google it, and it's a free test that some university does, and they allow you to pick 4 different people in your life, and it's a really long test and you do that. But you then rate what your relationship is like with each one of those, and then they map you out on the attachment style grid. And it's interesting because your score is not going to be the same. So you may be disorganized with your partner, but you may be secure with your kids, but you may be anxious with your sister or something like that. So it's not black and white. Part of the attachment is about how the other person is and responds. So it's not just all on me. It's like I'm reacting to how safe this relationship feels. So also don't get tied up in that you always have a disorganized attachment style. You may have a disorganized attachment style with him, but not maybe with everybody else.
Well, that's what I was wondering about, because it feels so global. If I just say, well, and then it's all, the problem is me on that, versus, okay, this is a relationship where you were being blamed for everything bad, and he gets to, he gets to waltz away going, oh yeah, it was all, all on them. I did throw in the chat too, Dr. Rob wrote a book, Codependence Beyond the Myth of Codependency, because codependency is like, what did you do? What's wrong with you? And codependence is nothing you did or didn't do cause this, and how convenient for addicts to go, yeah, it's all their fault. No, we are responsible, for ourselves, our behaviors, our triggers, all of those things. So it's an easy escape to blame shift to a partner, and unfortunately you're left sitting there going like, oh, I've got this disorganized attachment style, and what do I do? I think work on healing you for sure, so that any future relationship you have, you have the ability to watch out for those relationship red flags, shall we say. So okay, the next one, if I can get my little cursor to move, there it goes. Goodness. Okay, how do you deal with your partner who is in so-called, I love this, in so-called recovery, but cannot deal with your triggers or pain and just leaves the room when you're triggered or crying? I understand he is still dealing with his shame, but I feel so abandoned every time.
Of course you do. And that totally sucks. And I'm sorry that that happens. The reality is that although maybe he has some sobriety under his belt, he hasn't learned emotional intelligence yet. So addicts in general tend to have a low tolerance for pain, really low. And that's why they end up using whatever their drug or behavior of choice happens to be. Is when they feel pain, they end up using to numb the pain. So now I've gotten some sobriety under my belt. I've done the first couple of steps, and I got 60 or 90 days of sobriety. But then my partner is having a fit over there. My partner had a really bad day, or they got triggered by something, and they're crying, or they're struggling. I don't know. I don't know how I handle that. And so I leave. Like I bolt out of there. It's unfortunate. And part of what we continue to work with the person on as they're continuing to do recovery is, how do you hold still? How do you hold space? How do you not internalize it? How do you just stand there and be able to like put your arm on their shoulder and just say, hey, like, I'm here. That they have to learn how to do that. And John Gottman in his Love Lab, as he was studying, and he hooks up all these guys and wives and husbands onto all these monitors and stuff. When emotions happen, whether you're an addict or not, men tend to not deal with emotion very well, because we've not been taught how to deal with emotion. And so when that happens, the cortisol levels in their body like skyrockets. And cortisol is like this chemical in our body that makes us feel itchy and uncomfortable, and we just want to like get out of there because we're uncomfortable. So that comes with learning and practice of, how do I stay and how do I recognize? So it would be helpful. It's sad for you, and this may explain why he does what he does, but there's not a whole lot you can do to make that change. Hopefully he will reach out to somebody who can help mentor him or teach him how to develop some empathic tools so he can hold space with you. Right now he's bolting because he doesn't know how to deal with it. It's not that he doesn't love you or care about you. He doesn't know how to deal with it. So he's bolting, which is not cool, but it makes me sad that that's happening to you.
So I just put in, and again, a little bit of this is time frame. Like, if it's just really been a short time, then I've got a bunch of thoughts. But I put in the chat, out of the doghouse for men who've been caught cheating, and that's how that's one work group, and it's not going to magically fix everything, but it's a work group to build trust and learn to have a little bit of empathy. But yeah, uncomfortable feelings, like don't know how to do this, emotionally immature, all of those things are true. But I also hear the dance of, you're triggered and you're crying and he's leaving the room, and so I'm going to invite you. Who can you reach out to that can support you when you're crying and upset? Because it isn't him yet. Not giving him a pass, but you deserve support. So we Tonglen, if you haven't been part of that group, that's a group of betrayed partners. There's bunches of them, and they find peers that they can connect with. On our drop-in groups, many of the women connect with others in the group, so they have their numbers to call. Like when you're feeling triggered, I'm going to write a blog about this. Like when I'm feeling triggered, that's data for me. What do I need to do to take care of me? It may be, instead of trying to engage with your partner who can't show up for you, I can only imagine how much extra that adds to the pain. What can you do that would be nurturing and self-care for you? Doing some breathing. Troy has talked about different breathing techniques, before. And like, what can you do to get grounded? You can have the discussion about, the whatever, but have it when you're able to do so, from a different place. Then maybe your spouse can hear you. But otherwise, you guys can keep doing this. I'm triggered and crying, he leaves. I'm triggered and crying, and he leaves. That's a painful place, for you, and isn't helping, with the relationship. But if he's doing the work for recovery, if he's got a solid foundation of of at least abstinence and working on sobriety, great. If he's not there yet, then again, the Sex Addiction 101 online work group starts July 6th, but the Out of the Doghouse starts, I forgot which date. We've got too many of them, I can't remember, but check out the link that's on in the chat, because all of those are good resources. And you can always email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com, and I'll help you get pointed towards resources too. Troy, what if we can't figure out a plan if we are abandoned?
So I think that's from the previous question about how do you deal with the fear of being abandoned. So a part of that is, well, are you being abandoned? When we go over the attachment wounds, I tell people be really careful about putting an ED at the end of those attachment wounds, like rejected, betrayed, abandoned, because what that connotates is that you're a victim. And in one sense, yes, you are. Like, yes, okay, so yes, you were abandoned, or yes, you were rejected, or whatever. But if I stay in that victim energy, that's going to continue to perpetuate this sense of powerlessness. I can't figure out a plan. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do. It's always going to be like that. And so part of that is saying, that's why I use the words of, like, I have an abandonment wound that got hit. It's different than I'm abandoned. If you can hear the difference between the two, it's like, okay, I have a sunburn and you bumped up against it, but I'm gonna do first aid. I'm gonna take care of it. I'm gonna find a way to do that. So that's part of it, is recognizing that you are capable of finding some solutions. Your shadows of shame may be so loud and telling you, especially the impotent one, telling you you're never going to figure this out. It's always going to be doom and gloom. No one's ever going to show up for you. And so being able to find someone who you trust, like you can find those in Wee Tonglen and some of the other support groups that we have, or a therapist or a coach or something, where they can help you start to map out that plan. Sometimes when our shadows are so overwhelmingly suppressive, I can't really do it by myself. I'm going to need some support. And so I'm glad you're here. And it's okay to say, I need some support. Can you help me come up with a plan? We can change the plan next week if it doesn't work, but let's come up with something. Let's figure out how we're going to handle that.
And I want, like, we all need help. Like, there are moments when I just go, like, I need to phone a friend. And Troy has talked about that too, where we just need to get regulated and, do the next right thing. It isn't like we have to have the whole plan all mapped out with everything. Like Troy was saying, it's like, okay, here's a plan for now, to be adapted as needed. But otherwise it's so overwhelming, and I've had some really hectic days, and like, I just go do the next right thing. And I've got a plan, but I'm not worrying about everything on the agenda or plan. I'm just going, I just need to take care of this right now, and that's enough. So get support, please, to help break down, so that you have the ability to do the next thing, and that's all you have to worry about in the moment. Okay, my wife has a strong fear of abandonment, likely based in her abuse, sexual emotional abandonment as a child. She always feared that I would leave her, despite the fact that there's no real risk of that. She became overwhelmed as part of postpartum depression that she had and began to feel worthless, especially since she was so proud of being a mother and now felt ashamed because she couldn't bind with the new baby. She had an affair and loved the validation and had sex in exchange for that validation. She was addicted to the praise. Then she started a pattern where she would reimagine the sexual abuse during the physical act, and that was truly an addictive experience. This was so far from the person I thought I knew. She feared abandonment and then did the very thing that would maximize the chance of that happening. Can you help me understand this? I love her so much, but my heart is broken.
My heart hurts too. So you've identified she has abuse wounds, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. She has an abandonment wound. She has a rejection wound. She has a betrayal wound. She probably has a loss wound. She has all 6 of those attachment wounds that are going on. And depending on how old she was when those happened, you said as a child, like she's had those since she was little. And so how this works is they get ingrained into our body response, and any little thing, a look, uh, a phrase, something that's said, a smell, can smack up against one of those wounds, and then immediately we go into the fight or flight response. And it's often unconscious as our way of trying to deal with the excessive amounts of pain that we're dealing with. And so we're in fight or flight response, which means we're not really thinking clearly anymore. The blood that normally is in our prefrontal cortex is gone to our heart and our lungs and our biceps and our quads, so we can get out of there. And so if that's happening frequently, she's probably in like an anxiety depressed state all the time. So I don't know if she was hiding that she was postpartum depression, or she didn't even recognize that she was in postpartum depression, and she didn't know how to even say what she was feeling because she's feeling so in pain. So you've identified that your heart is hurting, you love her so much, and just imagine that, like, if you were able to see on the outside what her wounds look like on the inside, you'd see a very battered woman who has a ton of like bruises and scars um and different things like that are just so intense. So she's going to behave in ways to try and deal with those, and they aren't according to her value system. They're just not. And then she hates herself even more. She ends up inflicting more pain and more hurt on herself. So part of that is hoping that she's going to a qualified therapist who understands trauma and can help her start to unpack this trauma, which is what is leading her to do what she does. It may also be helpful for you to go to a therapist who understands trauma and helps you understand what you can do to be supportive. Try really hard not to take any of this personally, because this wasn't about you. It doesn't mean that she doesn't love you. It's just that she's been hurting so badly that she doesn't love herself. And so she's doing everything she can to try and deal with that. So this will probably take a while. There's some modalities of therapy that could help quicker than others, like EMDR, electrical brain something, for some people, but there's different ways. So go find a qualified therapist who understands trauma specifically and can help her work through that.
And I want to tag on to what Troy said about you. So like we have a betrayed partner group, specifically for men on Tuesday nights and a mixed gender on Sunday nights. And the betrayed partner work group is mixed gender as well. And that starts again on July 21st, which happens to be a Sunday. It's the first time we've offered it on a Sunday. So consider those resources for you. And I hear you focusing, on her, and I do want her to get the help that she needs. And I hear, children, or child or children involved, as well. So, getting the help, but betrayed partner, there's hurt for you. So, taking care of you, but, yeah, because nothing you did or didn't do caused this. So it's, her getting help and support to to act differently rather than lean back into problematic behaviors that make things worse, is key to all this. So, okay, Troy, I'm having issues with overcoming my internal sexual assault survivor voices and beliefs that are really sickened and terrified about the prospect of our future. What I may learn in disclosure and how to view my husband going forward. Ever since discovering last year that my husband has a sex addiction and that it has gone on for our 2-decade-long relationship and prior, it makes me feel like I'm married a person who is just like those multiple perpetrators that assaulted me in my youth. It's hard healing from that, but part of it was knowing I was in a monogamous relationship with a person who did not think like those people did. Now I know that that was not true. It's hard not to relate them, even though I know that they are unique people in unique situations. However, those people maybe did it once or twice. He did it for 2 decades. Advice. Wow.
Yeah, so I can hear how the similar belief structures from those people that hurt you are being additionally put on your husband. It sounds like you don't have the full disclosure yet, and so um, because I don't know your specific situation, I don't know how what is going to be said in there, but I hear the fear of like, am I going to hear some really bad stuff that's really normal, um, to have that fear. So hopefully you have a therapist who's helping you be prepared to work through that. Um, at the end of the day, it's like, so what do you need to do for you? What do you believe about yourself because of the sexual abuse wounds that you've encountered? And I get like you thought you were in a monogamous relationship and that felt safe, and now it doesn't. So now what do you need to be able to feel safe? What boundaries might need to be put in place? What clarity do you need? What kind of things do you need for you? And so it's a time for wound care for you. Um, he's going to do what he's going to do with his recovery, and I know that he has things that he needs to share with you and all that. That I want you to tend to your wounds and recognize that they just got reopened and they're hurting and they're really painful. And so how can you start to do some wound care for yourself? Going to support, getting therapy, practicing self-compassion, all those things.
Yeah, I was like, this is really lean into your qualified professional because this is deeper stuff, and all of the things that were suggested can be supportive of that. But I really hope that you're working with a qualified professional. If you don't have one, email me, and I will help you find someone. Okay, I got really traumatized by my partner, still am, and simple things are hard, like driving, clear thinking, daily chores, etc. He has returned, so it sounds like there was a separation, but I am a mess and I still need time alone and processing stuff. And now I sometimes feel ashamed for myself that I am struggling and emotional while I was a really good, shiny, smiley partner before, and wonder why would he want me back in this state?
Well, I would imagine he wants you because he loves you, but I can't say that for sure because I don't know your partner. What you're describing is PTSD symptoms. So you have post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And so you have disorganized thoughts. You have the challenge with the ability to focus. You're having a challenge being able to make executive decisions, which is all normal when you've dealt with what you're dealing with. And so that's going to take some time for your brain to heal and your heart to heal. And during that time, you're going to feel a lot of shame. Like your shame shadows are going to show up and say you're a horrible spouse and what's wrong with you. Well, nothing's wrong with you. It's just that your body's reacting to trauma. So, one, being patient and kind to yourself, working through that and helping you get some support for you to help you heal from those wounds is going to be at the utmost. And uh, he's going to have to deal with that because that's part of his behavior created some of this challenge that you're dealing with. So he's hopefully learning how to be empathic and responsive and supportive and non-judgmental on his own. But you you have the right to be able to heal, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, the self-care. So Debbie McCrae does a lot of webinars and talks about tools for betrayed partners. And I swear every time it comes up with self-care. And so you're going, I need some, of course you need space. Like this is very challenging. And to put a fake smile on your face and pretend, just like the addict has a facade on, like that would be a facade for you. So like, please show up as the real you. This is painful stuff, but I hope you're working with a qualified professional. And again, those webinars, this one too, are posted on our website. But Debbie McCrae has, like 10 things. And we always say, it's not just do these 10 things and it's all going to be good, but it's like, these are some things to do when you're going, I don't even know what to do. Try these things, take two, And so, but the compassion for you, shame is a useless emotion, like it's not going to help. Like, just like Troy is saying, those voices of shame, can be really loud, but they're unproductive. So, I would invite you to go like, gosh, I have been through a lot and I'm doing the best I can. And, you're showing up here, you're showing up for yourself. Fantastic. Keep showing up for yourself. Again, lots of supportive resources on our site. Let us know how we can help. Okay. How much time do you give addicts you work with to assess their willingness and capacity in general?
Will you read the second question too?
You think that they're tied together?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you fire addicts who aren't doing the work? Aren't therapists working against the partners when they keep treating lying clients?
So I don't have a timeline on recovery for people who are struggling with addiction. And if I'm seeing somebody individually, um, it's different than if I'm seeing them as a couple. So if I'm seeing a couple and I know that the husband, let's say the addict, is lying, I'm going to have conversations with him and saying, I'm not going to be able to continue to do couples counseling if you're going to continue lying, because I'm not going to be a party to your deception. So we either figure out how you're going to tell your wife, or I'm going to tell your wife that I can't see you anymore because your husband's not being honest. And then you're going to have to figure that out. But if I'm seeing the person individually, of course they're lying. That's one of the things that they do. And so I will continue to hold them accountable. I will continue to hold a mirror up. But some people, it takes longer for them to figure this out than others. And so I don't fire people because they're not doing their work. I have a client, honestly, I've been seeing for like 7 years. He's gone to 2 inpatient places, and he's finally able to get some sobriety under his belt, and he's starting to do some things better than before. Other people, usually doesn't take that long. The consequences for them have been profound enough that they're willing to do what it takes sooner. But personally, I don't have a timeline on that. You might as a partner, and that's fair, but my job is different than yours. So.
And this actually just came up in the peer case consultation group the other day. So Dr. Rob and our clinical director, Aaron, alternate on Tuesdays with professionals from all over the world. And this came up. And part of it is, if a therapist is working harder than the client, that's a red flag. And they have to, the therapist will look, I'm working harder than you. I want you to get help, but, and a lot of them are doing I can imagine how hard this is for your partner because I'm feeling this way. So there's ways to utilize it in there, but yes, I get lots of partners that go, for the guys that are coming into treatment, they'll say, he lies. Yes, we know that. We absolutely know that he lies to himself. That's denial. And then everyone else. So that's part of the whole package. I think the better question is, how long are you willing? I mean, it really, comes back to, this is more about, and healthy boundaries for you as a partner. It's, what are the consequences if your addict isn't doing the work? And you guys can, again, we talked about it earlier, you can stay in the same house and stuff. It just maybe I'm less available. I'm creating my own life with my support people, and I'm having lunch with friends, and I'm doing things over here, and you're left alone. So Okay, so
You want to
Oh.
save these for next time?
I will take a picture of those. Yeah, I thought we had one more and I thought we'd be able to get it, but yeah, then the more popped in, so. Okay, I'm getting them. Okay, I got them. So yes, I will save them for next time.
Awesome. Oh, I lost your audio.
A third webinar is not going to be, I think my things just went, oh,
I can
fudge.
hear you now.
Okay. I think my AirPod, so the July 3rd webinar is not happening. It will be the second week of July, so watch the schedule. It's correct on there. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Troy. Bye, everyone.
Bye.